Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. On behalf of the Society of American Archivists International Archival Affairs Section leadership, welcome to another installment of our Archival Landscapes seminars. I am Professor Karen Trivett, and I am the IAAS Junior Co-Chair and Steering Committee member. I'm also full professor and head of special collections and college archives here at the Fashion Institute of Technology. It is one of 64 campuses of the State University of New York. Just for a little background, the Archival Landscapes virtual seminar series actually began 4 years ago in 2020. In each seminar, an international guest speaker, or as our case is today, speakers, plural, introduces audiences to the issues and advancements in their local context while describing the history, operating environment, and unique aspects of archival practice in their country. Just a few housekeeping points. Please mute your microphones, as most of you already have, thank you, and close video transmission, if you will, to free up our bandwidth. Also, feel very free to write questions in the chat box, and we will certainly address those in the order they are received, if possible, at the end of today's program. We will certainly have time for some questions. So, our esteemed guests today for today's spring seminar are both affiliated with the historical papers and research archives of the William Cullen Library at the University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa. They are Elizabeth Marima, archivist, and Gabrielle Mahale, acting head. Together, they will discuss responsibilities and potentials and within the politics of archiving South Africa. So welcome to you both. As I said earlier, I'll let you know when we have reached the 5-minute mark, and then we'll segue to question and answer for about 10 minutes. And with that, Gabrielle and Liz, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello. I'm from South Africa. I'm soon going home. You are still starting your day. We are delighted that you have invited us. Thanks for doing that. Thanks also to our colleague Ellen, who I met some years ago at the ICA's SUV section bureau. So I'm Gabrielle Mahale. My colleague Elizabeth Mariamra will introduce herself shortly. To relieve you from guessing, I originate from Germany. I've come to South Africa some 30 years ago following my husband who returned from political exile. And so here I am. Eventually I grow into the archival profession. I am from publishing and printing, but I grew into the archival profession, never looked back. So maybe I should jump straight into my presentation so that you know what this is all about when we talk about politics of archiving in South Africa. Is this clear?
It is. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Right. So the maybe just to say first who we are before we go into the actual politics of archiving. I want to look at my slides so that I know what I'm talking about. We are, this is our reading room. We are a large archive, even though the reading room is fairly small. You see these chairs, researchers are sitting around the same table. We sit in the same room, which is very nice because everybody is sharing and talking to each other over and above the fact that we can watch our researchers. Yeah, so we have grown out of a special collection that many libraries used to have, and over the years grow into a fully fledged, really big archive with more than 3,400 collections. Collections, of which some are just one file or one item. but others have some 2,000 archival boxes. So we are one of the largest independent archives in Southern Africa. We have diversified a lot over the years, and you will see that in the spread of our holdings. We hold records of in the meantime of NGOs, trade unions, political parties, as you see, political trials, many personal papers. It started off with the small Afrikaner collection that a certain Afrikaner collector actually brought in, and then was joined by the archive of the Anglican Church in Southern Africa, later by liberal organizations called Race Relations, South African Institute of Race Relations. So we traveled quite a road, to be honest, as an archive. From the 80s onwards, we had a kind of change in curatorship, which also determined what we hold, and I will come to that later. So we have some sensitive archives from the apartheid era, and I would speak to that issue as well, because it's very much part of the politics of archiving in South Africa. And we have, in the meantime, positioned ourselves strongly as an archive that speaks to civil society, helping transform civil society through the archives that we have, and also participate in dynamics of transitional justice and so on. We discussed certain terms with Ellen, my colleague Ellen here, such as civil society. So even these kind of terms are something that have become very much part of our archival discourse in South Africa, archives for civil society. The next slide, let me see. I hope I don't have an issue here. Yeah. Can you see that nicely? We have in 2015, we completed a process of setting up a good, sustainable digital repository, and we joined many globally who took on the ICAAS developed, initially ICAAS developed application Atom. So ever since, we also never looked back. We found things that we hadn't seen in years. We enjoyed our road that we traveled with implementing Atom as a digital repository. It was costly for us. It's something that many institutions in South Africa cannot afford. We were one of the first institutions to implement Atom, to have a proper digital platform for our work. And we were soon followed by our own national archive, believe it or not, that has ever since implemented Atom, and as well as organizations like the Nelson Mandela Foundation, also very active on that application, and very few. We can literally hold up one hand of institutions in South Africa that have a sustainable professional digital repository. University of Cape Town is another one, University of the Free State. Initially, the Tutu Foundation had set up an Atom application as well, Atom digital repository, Atom-based digital repository, but that no longer exists. It is, and that's also part of politics in South Africa. There is very little money going around, and we were fortunate enough to draw on funding from Atlantic Philanthropies. So often institutions here depend on external funding for what they want to do. It's not necessarily that the institution can provide this kind of funds. So we had external funding to do that. In the meantime, you see here, we have set our instance up. We have one instance at this institution, but we have set it up for multiple projects as well as archives. So you see them here. Afropix, those were a group of photographers in exile. Large photographic archive. Barloworld Randmines archive, that is the story of gold on the Witwatersrand. That's a Witwatersrand is a geographical kind of setup that was explored in the late 1800s, and these that shaped not only Johannesburg, the city that grew out of this, but also South Africa. South Africa is known for gold. Medio, that was a group of artists in exile. South African History Archive, a very renowned South African archive of struggle and liberation as well. Robert Sobukwe, that was the Pan-Africanist Congress. So we have these projects sitting here, each of which have their own holdings, but we administer it. And this is our main website, entry point kind of to our archive. That is historical papers. So when I talk about diversifying over the decades by now, you can see these kind of items that we used to hold initially, even preceding this, is so-called what we call settler history. This kind of item, this photograph here in the upper corner, is something that comes out of, we had the apartheid state had, a colonial and the apartheid state had something called native commissioners. So these native commissioners were kind of the link between the communities, African communities, and the state, for the state to administer these communities. So these kind of records here are coming out of collections such as native commissioners. The making of Soweto, as you see here, was kind of the next step. Again, the history of gold. This is a large photographic archive from the around 1896. Photographers that came out of Wales, I think they came, the Barnett brothers. The history of resistance and struggle, photos of women opposing the carrying of passes, and out of that also a large trade union movement coming to the fore in the wake of workers coming to the mines, and the big cities, forming the big cities. Of course, right here in the middle, Nelson Mandela's last sentence from a paragraph from his speech from the dock in 1964, which made the rounds through many anti-apartheid events, posters, jazz concerts, songs, all kinds of expressions. This very last sentence of his speech from the dock. It is an ideal for which I'm prepared to die. This is right here at our university. This release all political prisoners on the steps of our great hall. The photographs here that you see also from the segregated history of South Africa. This is what used to be called a colored family, between these cars here that they admired, and resistance to conscription. So and here, of course, our dilemma that we're sitting with now, and I come to that in the next slide, are records that have reached us from former employees of the secret police, and it's a very interesting dynamic that I want to present. I must warn sensitive viewers, as they always say, colleagues. This slide is slightly brutal, but it is the reality of archival holdings and also archival discourse and issues and politics that we are dealing with in South Africa. So these photographs are coming from that very same collection of former member of the security police, quite a leading, was quite high ranking. And so he brought in these photographs. You see this unit, that was a police unit that operated in Namibia. That was the cross-border war into Namibia against SWAPO. And you see the way in which this posing happens in comparison to the posing of hunters. Anybody killing wildlife, it's very much the same. On the right hand side, the same. So these photos alone have been researched for that kind of aspect, the way they are displayed. For us, these photos are also a dilemma in terms of what do we have, what can we show, what can we make available. There are much more brutal photos in this collection, and they actually could form, if the government of Namibia was interested, could form parts of human rights abuse cases being brought to international courts, because as you can see, these the display of these are killed SWAPO fighters that first of all are missing for the families back in Namibia, but are also these atrocities were part of that cross-border war, a war with very little rules, if there can be rules in war, which there are. But so these photos have reached us, and we need to find ways in which we can work with them, but also ways in which we are allowed to work with them, because one could say that they actually belong into the National Archive, but here they are with us, a university-based archive. So in terms of accountability, which is my next slide that I need to speak to, is the fact how we engage with records that are coming our way, that actually speak not only to the past but also to the future, and that is shown here in the past. Obviously, the secret police documents that are still classified, and our present is, this is the photograph shortly before what we call here the Marikana massacre, a shooting of striking miners in 2012, with 34 miners being shot down at this particular spot, and it led to a commission of inquiry, one of many in South Africa's history, but with very little consequences and outcomes, positive outcomes for the families of these miners that died in that massacre. And so again, the proceedings from this commission of inquiry were made available to us by the legal teams of the families of the killed miners. And so we are sitting with massive evidence that is still being used now, because the widows of the miners, having run out of patience because of the lack of support from the state, have taken up and have taken the state to court. So you have actually coming, you have judges from the Constitutional Court who are coming to us and asking for this evidence and exhibits that are also part of what was deposited with us. So as an archive, we are suddenly seeing ourselves in a kind of compromised role. These are documents that should be available at the Department of Justice, and yet they are not. So as an independent archive, we are sitting, first of all, with classified material from the apartheid past that has not been declassified, and we are sitting with new in part classified material, that too shouldn't be with us. And as much as we say archives provide a bedrock for how society understands the past, and they underpin citizen rights and identity, uphold principles of access, everything that we hold kind of counters what should be happening. So we have this documentary evidence of supporting victims for reparation, reconciliation, and transitional justice from the past, but we also have this new documentary evidence from our very same present. And so we are finding ourselves constantly counterweighing official records and dominant discourses. One of the dominant discourses, of course, is the discourse around the liberation movements, the leading political party, African National Congresses. What can I say? It's yeah, not just the dominant discourse, but it's also the leading story of how the liberation of South Africa unfolded. And yet we have many counterparts sitting in our archives, how many other movements have contributed to that story, but whose stories have been suppressed in the grand narrative that is being presented. And so this is our role to society in terms of accountability, or assisting accountability to society. As a potential, we are presenting the archive, we are bringing the archive forward in saying we are calling this history from below, and we are handling it carefully but also forcefully. And so many of the civil society archives, independent archives, two of which are held in universities. We are entering that big field of archival discourse to say archives have a massive purpose. And when you go back to the slide that I've been talking about, where I've asked for sensitive colleagues to maybe watch it with, look at it with caution. We are very much aware that we are holding these kind of records that we can put forward to make our point that archives for us in South Africa are not for niceties. And that is what I presented at the time to an academic forum, to say to our colleagues in academia, we are viewing archives as forces and not as niceties. That is why maybe I didn't explain that explicitly, that that I presented these quite horrible photographs. There were more. A movie was made out of some of these photographs, and I presented it with the purpose of saying, look, this is what we have. Archives have that role for us, and in bringing forward that role, we are partnering with our colleagues in academia. One of them being, it's called the Wits University of Witwatersrand, Wits History Workshop. The South African History Archive, which is an archive that I mentioned earlier on, also based at this university, but also with other archives in the Cape in Cape Town that have similar holdings. Our holdings speak to each other. So we are collaborating to say what we need to say about our holdings, and we had this initiative such as to call for a blanket declassification of apartheid era archives. The reason being that the South African Archives Act very much provides for opening the archive to the citizen once it has been transferred to the National Archive. However, you know the role of creators. It is the creator that has to declassify, and we do not have an automatic kind of, if I can say, process of declassification. It's partly due to an absence of proper resources to do that, but also there is an absence of a mechanism to do that, to say to civil society, look, these records have been released, they can be publicly accessed. It is not happening that way. So we called for that, declassifying the apartheid era archives. We trended on Twitter in 27 for that event. And so it was a really good event. And yeah, also workshop on public history and archiving from below. I leave you with my last slide. I would have hoped here this. We developed a People's Guide to Archives, which is very dear to us because we are giving the citizens a tool to enter the environment, the world of archives, which is really not easy to penetrate. And so we developed this guide together with visual artists, Judy Seidman, drawing up this map. And it's quite a lengthy guide explaining the entire archival landscape, but providing links, providing entry points. And we put that on issue. It is still there and it's still actively running. It might need some updating at some stage, but this is where we feel that this is something that we could offer for the citizens for the time being. Yeah, so I'll leave you with this one, and I will stop sharing. My colleague Elizabeth will talk to something that she is working, or is very much part of her field in our archive, which is genealogical research, and never undermine the role of genealogical research in South Africa, even that is political.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. And Liz, we welcome you. Let's see, you're muted, Elizabeth. Let me see if I can manage that.
Yes.
There you go.
Hey, yes, you can hear me. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
My name is, I have said, is Gabrielle, Gabby. Okay, I call her Gabby. I hope she doesn't mind on this forum. My name is Elizabeth, as Gabby has alluded earlier. Originally I come from Zimbabwe, but I just came here on a program that we were doing with the South African History Archive. Then from there, I didn't look back. I come from the academic librarianship background, teacher education to be particular, but I found myself being closed, and I decided to venture more into something that gives me something new every day, which I really found in archives. Every day you find new things, you are reliving people, you are reliving societies, you are reliving systems and everything. So I really love what I'm doing. In this archive, as Gabby has said, one of my major portfolios is looking at the genealogical research. And within our collections, the major source of genealogical research resource we have is the church records, mostly the Anglican Church in Southern Africa. Although it later shrunk to only South Africa, but in the beginning of the Anglican Church, since its inception into Southern Africa, it covered the region itself, which is Southern Africa, including Zimbabwe, which was which used to be called Mashonaland. Then there was also, it also stretched as far as Mozambique, and it used to be called Lebombo, and we had the Damaraland, which is Namibia, and then also Lesotho, a little bit of Swaziland here and there, but then it later shrunk as the church grew, and then the dioceses had to grow and they had to be demarcated into smaller units. From there, what we have in the in the church archives are everyday religious services, the registers, the meetings, and the synody, the vestries, and all the clergy operatives of the church. And from those records, we find that people get married, people get baptized, people get confirmed, and people get buried. With burials, I mean the church conducting the last rites of a dead parishioner, and those are also recorded, and they are official records that can be changed between nations, governments, and all that. So they are also used it for genealogical research. We have the Anglican Church as the major one, and we also have other small breakaway denominations from the Anglican Church, like the African Anglican Church, which came in because of political rights. That way, that some people of Africa felt that they were not being well represented as far as their religion and culture was concerned. So you can see little bits and pieces of separation from the mother church, which is the Anglican Church. And we also have the Presbyterian Church, the Church of England, which also is the mother of the Anglican Church, if I can say. It also makes part of that. So the importance of these church records is that they are used to create local histories. Before the people get into Anglicanism, they used to have their own way of doing things, their cultures and all that. So after the Anglican people came into Southern Africa, they had to convert people. And at the same time, remember, when people are being converted, they are like persuaded, and then some parts of their culture is taken together with them into the church, and so that they don't feel very lost as all that. So with those kind of records, you realize that some identities within the African people of Southern Africa may be found, those records. And because of the baptisms, the marriages and all that, you see that those records are used to unite families through currently immigration, and they are also being used to settle legal issues, land rights, land claims, inheritance. You find all that being used to find those answers are being answered by church records. So apart from being used after the pulpit, there's quite a lot that the church records do to the society. You can also, we can also see researchers who are coming, who are trying to mark the demographic trajectories from the time that the church started and up to now. You can easily see the demographic trajectories, the changes that were taking place in people, in the society, movement, resettlement, and also the socio-political framework of the country. You can easily see it from there. So you find that people, because of the languages, I think Debbie, my colleague, also spoke about the languages. Having 11 languages, we are talking of the official languages, not talking about the dialects within the languages. So you find that spellings and all that, and people change names, and somebody wants to understand what kind of language, what kind of name, what it meant, and all that. So all those church records, they bring out those answers to the society. Those are the importance of the church records that we have here. The challenges that we are now looking at as an archive. Remember, the records in the church were created to make sure that there is smooth running, there is order, as far as people are looking at their religion, their faith. This is the pulpit. Then outside the pulpit, then there is something else. So from an archival point of view, we look at the archival theory. We need to be authentic. We need to make sure that there is coherence between records and all that. But then they, because of the time that the church started, we find that there is ambiguity in the communication of operation procedures when it comes to record keeping in churches. That one is a big issue on its own. And then you find that at the end, there are double standards. Even if there is some flimsy legislation around it, you find that there are sometimes double standards when it comes to the enforcement of those legislative pieces of from the government. So which means that the government of the South African government, when it comes to church records, the government, I can certainly say, it's not investing enough into the record keeping part of the church. There is an oversight because you look at the marriage certificate, it's an official document that is recognized apart from the rights of marriage. Even if somebody gets married in church, that's an activity that happens. That's a right that has been done. Even if that marriage is evoked, but behind that marriage, there are children that are born. There are people who have changed the names. There are people, identities are now being broken here and there because there is no legislature that says a church has to look after its record. 1, 2, 3. Just like the library, it says to all authors, all people who are writing books and all that, to say there is a legal deposit. You find that such kind of records do not have a legislature that is there to say they are supposed to be depositing, because in the near future or even in the tomorrow, there will be somebody who is going to look after that, is going to look for that document for this purpose or the other purpose. Identities, as I have said. This legal settlement, people are claiming lands, they don't know who adopted who, and then they later married and the person died and who did this and that. The church is not very serious when it comes to looking after its record. Yes, they are good in creating records, but they don't know how important those records are as far as the legislature is concerned internationally. Then you find that because of that poor investment in record keeping, gaps are created in related records, of which there is a broken history. If somebody is writing a genealogical history of a clan, say of a settlement or whatever, but then if there are gaps, then it means they will never be filled in. Sometimes you find that, yes, we may rely on oral histories, but people die and everything. Can you imagine what has happened during the pandemic? All those people, there's that gap, and who is going to fill it? It's always a problem in the genealogical research resources when it comes to gaps in the records. Those kind of gaps, and also the flimsy legislature, it makes people not to trust the government record system. In archives, we all strive to have our researchers to trust our sources. The moment they lose their trust in us, they don't even mind whether it is from this other side or whatever, but whatever they want to do is to have an authentic, satisfying, and something that you can believe in, to say, okay, based on this, I am going to come up with this fact. So primary sources are so easy to lose. They might be in there, but as soon as a researcher loses trust in the resource, then archivists are in trouble. So these loopholes, the result, if we look closely, and then, for example, with the marriages and all that, people need to know their history. People need to do migrations. People need to claim their inheritance because of the loopholes that are there, because people are desperate to have whatever they want. It results in falsification, manipulation, and also defacing of the record that is meant to be there, so that people will only get. But anyway, sometimes in most cases, as activists, as you and me, we are trained enough to understand when a document has been falsified or if it has been manipulated.
Liz,
So those
sorry
are
to
the
interrupt.
challenges.
I just wanted to let you know you have about 3 minutes,
Okay, no,
3
it's
or 4
fine.
minutes.
So the other thing is the church doesn't have awareness. They don't give their parishioners the awareness. The parishioners who get married, who create this record, they don't even know that there is such kind of information about them out there. They are not aware of what they are going to the pulpit to do after changing vows, and where the information is going and what it is good for and where it's being kept. And then the ownership of church records. There are church records that may belong to the church, but they are church records that belong to the state because they are official records. Because they are attached to official certificates, official documentation that belongs to the state. So the church may not know. That is why sometimes you find that administrators in the churches do not look after their records very well. They don't know what they are putting themselves in. So the ownership of the records, especially when people want to reproduce the archival collections of churches, you find it very difficult. Sometimes you have to go to the archbishop. Sometimes they will tell you it is the archdiocese. They want to tell you that it is there is no legislation that tells us who owns what. So we end up using disclaimers, and sometimes it can be very difficult for archivists to maneuver. So the historical shortcomings, the last one is the historical shortcomings of the divisions that apartheid, as Gabi was saying, that saw the church having problems with their records. Sometimes you see that there were times, especially in Southern Africa, that the color lines were so much defined that people could not attend the same church or be baptized in the same premises as the other ones. So you find that records with the same description at the same parish, they are in different parts. And then it divides the whole point of the interrelatedness of archives according to the archival theory. So I rest my case there to the challenges, and this is what we are facing here as far as church records are concerned.
Very interesting. Thank you so much. And thank you, Gabrielle. I'd like to invite people to ask questions. You can raise your hand or put it in the chat. You're also welcome to, let's see, you can open up your camera and present yourself if you'd like. No pressure. Let me see if I can unmute some people. Anyone have a question? I have a few if we can kick things off with my voice again. Let's see. Oh, very good. Jennifer has a question. Are people given a copy, a personal copy of their marriage license or certificate, or is that information held solely by the church? Liz, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. People are given their copy of the marriage certificate. But as you know, some things get lost. People die. And then the family who would need these kind of records might be a fourth or fifth generation from the person who got married. So the only hope they have is the church record, which is the register itself. I am so happy that most of the people, most of the researchers that I deal with, they are coming from embassies, most home offices in South Africa, the foreign home offices. They accepted the register entry in place of the real marriage certificate, because they say the marriage certificate is a derivative of the register. The register comes first.
Mm.
So it is the register entry that is used to go and register a marriage with a Home Affairs office. So they accept that. That's the first thing. The second thing that they also accept, that is a good thing, is the baptismal certificate can be accepted in the place of a birth certificate. That is if the child was baptized within 6 months of their life. So what I am here to do for such kind of people is I take the page on which there is the entry, I make a copy of it, and then I authenticate it, and then after that I write a confirmation letter with the university letterhead that states that we are the official archive for the Anglican Church in Southern Africa. If you have an issue with this record, you may contact us.
That just seems like so much work. How many requests like that do you get, for example, in a semester or whatever term you hold it at your university?
Actually, if I look back, Gabby, can you assist me here? I've just forgotten. I did the stats last year when the genealogical research. There was a very, so 38%. Can you remind me, Gabby? There was a very quite a
Around
chunk.
Round about that, yeah,
Yes.
that's the figure more or less,
Percent
yeah.
of all our researchers, they were genealogical.
Wow. That is
And
significant.
most of them are for migration and estate claims.
We have another question for you, Liz, and then I'm going to ask Gabrielle a question. Shelley asks, do you think the government will require churches to register all ceremonies with a type of vital statistics in the future?
We have never ventured into that terrain of involving the government, but we have had series of talks with the Archbishop's office, which is the Bishop's Court, and I was intending to go there maybe in the third quarter or the last quarter of this year to go and workshop the administrative staff of the Bishop's Court on how they have to group their records together, especially the outgoing Archbishop, of which that is what we have space for only at the given time. But then later, and given the time that we would have, we are waiting for a full complement of staff in our office. Maybe when that comes, then we might think of engaging with the rest of the Anglican Church dioceses so that we can go about having them workshopped and at least and see how important whatever they have in their offices are. But we haven't engaged with the government, of which it is our wish.
Right. Thank you so much again. And thank you, Shelley, for the question. And Gabrielle, I have a question for you. If you'll open your camera to answer. I'm just curious, infrastructurally, what is your budget like? How are you funded? And what is your traffic like in a given year?
Money is never enough. Could I quickly add something to Shelley's question? The church has a duty to register marriages and so on. So they do have a duty to do that with the Home Affairs offices. To which extent the gaps exist, yeah. Our budget is submitted to the university library, so we fall under university library. Our salaries, our operational costs are covered by the library according to our budget submission, what we identified that needed to be done. university, of course, puts priorities where it wants to invest, and so certain projects and programs, we always make sure that we look for external funding. So even large collections, we do look. For example, we have a large NGO coming our way called Section 27 that receives good funding, probably also foreign funding, where we would say fund an archival contract to process this collection. So that is what we do in order to make up for the shortfalls that we have. We are understaffed, of course, like every archive. We have a decent backlog, like every archive. So we are trying to make ways and means to complement what the university offers. But the university does take a really good responsibility for the holding that it has, and it thrives on on this archives and its status that we enjoy. Yeah.
And also, Gabrielle, you mentioned you displayed your activity in Atom. I was wondering, we use Atom here at the Fashion Institute, and we also engage Archivematica for digital preservation. What do you do in terms of digital preservation?
The same.
Yes,
So
yes.
until 2 years ago, my position was included looking after the digitalization center. By now, that program has grown so massively that we divided the two. However, as an archive, we are still very much involved in aspects of digitalization, but that also includes obviously digital preservation. And so, Archivematica, we do have a contract with Artifactual, and so everything that goes through the digitalization program ought to be preserved. Yeah.
Right. I'm extremely happy with Artifactual. I hope you are too.
Yeah. Yes, yes, we are. Yeah.
Yes. So for either of Gabrielle or Liz, what would you say, or is there a record or a series, even if it's a textual or photographic entity, is there anything that really caused you to pause in terms of accepting it into the collection? Because I know of the sensitivity that you've shared with us today. I didn't know if there were anything that gave you real pause.
Well, we had to retract. We still have a collection that has to do with, it was called the Age Law Project. So a lot of legal cases that were taken up on behalf of people that are HIV positive, especially in the first years of that pandemic. We are an open access archive, but we had to close that collection. So we going forward, we would also no longer accept any collection that cannot be openly accessed. We are finding ways of making our archives accessible, and that includes the archive of the secret police that during apartheid. We are finding ways of withholding where we need to withhold, but also bringing out where we need to bring out. And but overall, we are open access. Everything should be, accessible for research. That's the idea.
Absolutely. Well, we're at 5 minutes till, and that gives me just a few minutes to announce some points for the future. First of all, for today, I will let you know that we are recording, and this installment will be available via our YouTube channel and our playlist for archival landscapes. What else? The next landscape seminar will focus on Asia. That's our summer installment, and that will be on May 16th. And we shall feature the National Archives of South Korea. So we're very excited about that. And I want to ask my colleague Ellen to announce our very next programming opportunity, if she will.
Hello, everybody. I just put this in the chat as well. Our other series in this section is called the Vistas Briefings. And that this year, the topic is international education and work experiences. And we'll be talking about this one more time on April 25th at 11 a.m. Central. So please watch your listservs or contact us for the Zoom registration. We'd love to see you there.
So as you can tell, those of you remaining with us, we're a very busy, active, productive section. We would love to have you join us for these future opportunities. And I would just want to thank our guests today, Gabrielle and Liz. It's just been such a pleasure to have you with us today and to give us some details about your operation. And I certainly want to thank all the attendees for being here with us today. And if there are no more questions, we will close this session. Oh, we do have one more question. Jennifer.
Actually, I was clapping, but
Oh,
just giving a yay, great session.
all the better, all the better. Thank you so much. And Gabrielle, Liz, I hope you have a wonderful evening. I'll stop recording.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.